Well, the year 2014 has witnessed the passage of security bill in Kenya, the purchase of $1 billion arms in Nigeria, and increased insurgency in Egypt's Sinai. It appears every part of Africa has its fair share of security issues. What does 2015 portend for the continent? Will it usher in the much-needed peace? Usually, our analyst David Smith speaks to us from Johannesburg, but he's joining us live tonight in the studio here in Lagos. David, it's good to have you in the studio in Nigeria. Welcome.
Thank you. It's extremely pleasant and a pleasure to be here.
That's great. All right, now, you've been following all the security challenges in South Sudan, in Kenya, in Nigeria, in Mali, and up north in Egypt, and so on. Now, why are all of these things coming almost at the same time on the continent?
Oh, I think there's a variety of reasons for that. Not all of them are linked. And, may I start by saying let's hope that 2015 is going to be a more peaceful year than 2014 has been, although indications are it's probably going to get off to a rough start. A lot of the problems we're experiencing today have a lot to do with what happened in Libya when Muammar Gaddafi was killed and thrown out of power. I mean, as you know, the country's been in a horrible state of insecurity since then, and what happened after Colonel Gaddafi was removed is a lot of arms that had been either hidden or in the hands of the government at the time were released to all kinds of different groups that have spread to other parts of the continent, notably places like Mali, perhaps even to part of your country, to northeastern Nigeria as well. Some of those arms may have ended up in the Central African Republic and other areas that are becoming increasingly unstable. In simple terms, we don't live in isolation. What happens in one country is often linked to what's happening in other countries. And that's, I think, what we're seeing certainly in Northern Africa, parts of Central and Western Africa. And then there's the whole Horn of Africa, East Africa area where, we were talking in the news, we were talking about Kenya just a moment ago and new security bills. Well, as long as the Kenyan army and the Ugandans and the Burundians and others are part of AMISOM, the African Union mission in Somalia, chances are it's going to be unlikely we'll have peace in East Africa, Horn of Africa, because there are too many countries involved in the affairs of sovereign states.
Now, what do you make of the Western powers' effort in trying to help fight the African countries, this challenge of insecurity in the African countries?
Well, I'd start by quoting a former French president, Charles de Gaulle, who at the time of independence of many African states in 1960 said, countries don't have friends, they have interests. And I think what we're seeing, whether it be the NATO strikes on Libya to remove Gaddafi, or the American forces in Africa, AFRICOM, who are operating in a number of African states, yes, the Americans are fighting what they call the war on terror, but excuse me, there are other interests at play as well. I mean, I'd feel a lot more comfortable if finally organizations like the African Union could get their African standby force together and solve security issues internally. Now, that's been a long time coming. The AU has been talking about this for years. It seems at the last AU summit in Malabo in Equatorial Guinea, some progress was made on moving that forward. But until African armies join the standby force, until they become perhaps a bit more professional and are better resourced, in your own country, in Nigeria, you've been short supplies, money, logistics to deal with some of the difficulties you've got, in particular in the northeast of this country. Until these armies are perhaps better resourced and better trained. Central African Republic is a great example. The army in the Central African Republic doesn't even have arms at the moment. In fact, it's told that it can't arm. Until things are done at home, chances are we're not going to see much stability in the near future. Okay,
quickly, why do you think it's difficult for the AU to handle or tackle this insecurity issue internally by themselves?
Well, there's not across-the-board agreement amongst all members of the African Union as to who should be involved in security issues on this continent. For example, we had the Chadians involved in the regional mission in the Central African Republic, when in the CAR, many people in that country see Chad as the enemy. So it's extremely difficult for the African Union to sit down and get all members of that massive organization to agree on what's a security issue and what isn't. You know, some might say that Nigeria should have outside help from African Union members to deal with your difficulties in the Northeast. But Nigeria is a sovereign state, it's a proud state, it's a very difficult decision to say that perhaps we should have others coming in to help us with these security issues. So I think until the African Union is actually more united, until there's more unity within the African Union, it's going to be difficult for all players to agree. There are so many different agendas, and the African Union is not unique. When the Security Council at the UN headquarters in New York meets, when the General Assembly at UN headquarters meets, there's not any more agreement on how to deal with security issues there than there is at Addis Ababa at AU headquarters.
All right, now you've been involved with several projects in volatile areas across several countries in Africa. Now, if we have to narrow it down to the role of the media in trying to diffuse tension, what has been the impact so far?
Well, there have been positive and negative aspects on that front. You know, we all know about cases of hate radio in certain countries that spur people to take very negative action for neighbor to kill neighbor, or even family member to kill family member. And there have been other areas where radios played a role in helping to virtually bring down the front line in conflicts. You know, a good case in point was in the Democratic Republic of Congo, where the radio station in that country that belongs to the UN peacekeeping mission, MONUSCO, Radio Okapi, has played an important role in getting the various belligerent partners to talk together, rather than the rumor mill fueling the conflict to an even greater degree. In northeastern Nigeria, where you've got the difficulties with Boko Haram, you know, chances are, if there was a media project to help provide information to people living in that area, security information, both positive and negative, it would help diffuse or get rid of the rumor mill and allow people to make more informed decisions about, you know, how to go about their daily lives. So yes, the media plays an important role in areas where there's an information vacuum. It can fill that void.
There's been issues of porous borders where, and this has, as most countries have said, led to the flow of arms into the countries where this insurgency and insecurity issues have risen so far. Now, how can countries tackle this issue of the flow of arms and also help check their borders moving forward?
Oh, that's a very tough one, because as you know, a lot of these borders are very porous. It takes vast amounts of security and infrastructure to police a border. So there's got to be a police service and security services that are actually controlling the borders. And then there has to be this is probably a UN issue where the Security Council has to come down hard on arms producers who are sending the arms to the countries that are experiencing these insurgencies. And having said that, it's an almost impossible task, because the biggest arms producers tend to be the countries that are the permanent members on the Security Council in the United Nations. So arms is big business. You know, your government has a story of trying to buy arms from South Africa in the not too distant past, and I think that's an ongoing debate about whether or not that sale will ever go through. But until the arms business is regulated, and it probably never will be, it's going to be difficult to put a stop on those flow of weapons. Perhaps the best thing we can do is deal with securing borders more, so that, you know, when arms are crossing the borders, there are checks and balances that make sure that they stop at the border and don't get through.
All right, David Smith, thank you very much for joining us in the news right now.
My pleasure.
Thank you.